Yeah, it's been a rough year. You still, did you do anything yesterday?
No, just hung out with some friends in town, and we had a barbecue going, and that was about it. There were fireworks nearby.
Did you reflect on the year?
Of course, yeah.
How were the discussions like?
It was interesting. So more people than ever kind of feel like there's something wrong with the story and something isn't quite adding up. And yeah, these are good folks in Western Massachusetts. They would call them working class, and yeah, something's not quite right in the story here.
Yeah, like I can't remember which guest told me, but people are looking. I think, and I spoke to a lot of economists yesterday. He's like, Mario, like people are just looking at that we're talking about the gap, the inequality gap, and like people keep talking about Trump praising the stock market, etc., which we know is led by these big tech stocks. The average American, doesn't know that, but they also don't see their own lifestyle improve. They're like, all right, you keep talking about the stock market doing better, but our life is just getting worse and worse. And I was actually saw a clip of one of the guests, comedians that Joe Rogan has on his show all the time. The big guy, he's on the show all the time, the big comedian. And he's like, since I was young, I just gave up on voting because every 4 years you get a new president. He says all these things and then does the same things as the last guy. And I think this year broke a lot of people, I feel, because a lot of people put a lot of hope into Trump, and he did seem like the first president in so long, in so many decades, to really go against the swamp, whatever you want to call it. But then for him to revert back to such an extreme level to the swampy behavior, from making money from the presidency, going into forever wars, increasing debt, I think it really shook a lot of people.
Yeah, I would agree. And sort of that was my local bookend to last Wednesday. I was down in Washington, D.C. at a Feds for Freedom conference. And this is being led by a bunch of federal workers who really, they started where they got like really canned for their refusal to take the COVID jab, right? And so it was Feds for Medical Freedom, but they found out they have it's a bigger issue than that. And so they were really talking about, this was Jim Erdman invited me down. He's the CIA whistleblower who's been, in front of like Rand Paul. Anyway, but these were really great people, very dedicated. It was really heartwarming to see people that were like this solid, full of integrity. Joe Kent was there. And they're just very worried about the direction of the country. They were, I consider myself red pilled, black pilled, depending on the topic. They were pretty concerned that there wasn't an easy fix here.
Yeah, no, I'm starting to get that feeling as well. Yeah, that's worrying. Well, it kind of links to a piece of news that came out a couple of days ago, and that's Tucker. Did you see the comment he made about starting a new party? Actually, you referenced Joe Kent. I actually brought it up with Joe Kent as well, and he started floating the idea. Actually, I think I floated the idea to him. I'm like, what if you and Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene, I mentioned Matt Gaetz because he was part of the conversation, and Tucker and others. It's not about forming another party. Someone was explaining to me yesterday. It's about forming a bloc that has enough voting power, similar to what RFK did. I think Robert Barnes was explaining to me yesterday. It's like having a bloc that has enough following that could shift the needle for the Democrats or the Republicans, and then they have influence over the policies of whatever party they decide to back. So it's not about a third party getting the votes. It's about a group of a new party, if you want to call it that supports, that merges with the left or the right. Again, RFK is the best example when everyone was waiting to see which side he picks.
Yeah. Well, it's an attractive idea because I think a lot of people, myself included, feel politically homeless. To your first point, it doesn't seem to matter who you elect in. We get the same policies, right? It's just nothing seems to really change, right? The same war policy, the same foreign aid policies, the same lack of reform at the major health institutions. It's kind of nothing changes, and so that was what I found like was really concerning in with these Feds for Freedom, was the stories they told about the pressure they were put under by their respective organizations to get the vaccine when they didn't want it, right? And had every legal right, constitutional right to say no. But the pressure tactics were extraordinary. And the CIA people, they filed a suit against the CIA because what the CIA had done was, rather than saying, oh, this is an HR matter, we're going to try and lean on this person, they actually shifted the investigation of these people over to their counterterrorism task force, which you reserve for terrorists and known spies. So that's in their files now. They were treated in the same category as terrorists and known spies for simply saying, no, thank you.
Yeah, that's pretty screwed up. Another thing as well for someone that creates a lot of content than me, a story that I saw yesterday that the UK is trying to have influence over YouTube's algorithm in the UK. Not sure if you saw that, but this I thought 2 days ago, and I started thinking a lot about it. What I was thinking of is like, if they actually do this, people would either not even realize, and the ones that realize would still accept it and just choose complacency. For example, when people realized that YouTube was censoring content related to COVID, as one example, and I'm sure there's many other similar examples, people complained, but the majority of them just didn't care or didn't know about it. And even the ones that complained, I'm sure most of them still go on YouTube and still watch their content on YouTube. So I'm like, man, if I was in those rooms where the guys that have the influence making decisions, in their mind, do they think that they just have that ability to do whatever they want? Like, even if we know what they're doing, for example, the YouTube algorithm or the way they've weaponized lawfare to be able to get their agenda across, in their mind, there's nothing people can or will do about it. It's almost like the ship has sailed, which is even more worrying. Like, if Trump was able to start a war with Iran, it's like, this is like the craziest thing, right under probably the only worst thing that's logical, starting a war with Russia. So it's like the only next step up. But other than that, starting a war with Iran was like one of the craziest things Trump would do, if I told you that when he first got elected. Yet he still does it. And while he lost popularity, he still has a pretty strong support base in MAGA, weirdly enough.
Yeah. It's there's that sense of inevitability to all this, right? And there's a direction to this story, and it's been going there, and it's independent of who's in power. Weirdly, under Trump, we've had a much faster progression towards what we would call that technological, dystopia. I think of it, as other people think of it, as a utopia, but things that never could have been done under Biden, because the MAGA people never would have put up with it. But because it's Trump, it's okay. But when we're looking at the flock cameras bringing Palantir in to harmonize and merge government databases and on and on and on, that I don't think any of that would have been possible under a Democratic president. So faster.
Yeah, I agree.
Faster.
I agree. That's a good point. Trump, I remember one of my guests told me, talking about the Iran war, they said something along the lines of, if there's any person that could really break that relationship with Israel, it is Trump, who's right now the biggest backer of Israel, because Trump he's just got that ability to really do the unthinkable and get away with it. And you've given an example where that has happened or accelerated. But it could also accelerate in the other direction. It's not looking like that. I don't know. Like, what do you think of the possible shift with Israel? We've talked about it for many weeks now. Are you seeing anything substantial, not substantial, anything of substance other than the rhetoric since all the statements were made a few weeks ago? Because in Lebanon, Israel's still there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the bombing is still happening on a daily basis. So I don't know.
Yeah. And Iran is not reacting for some reason. So maybe we could discuss that in a bit. But I trust actions, not words, So if the central bank tells me gold is a barbarous relic, but they're accumulating it, I prefer to watch what they're doing. So in this case, there's words that say, oh, there's this fracture, not with Israel per se, but maybe between BIBI and Trump. But on the other hand, we have this Section 224. Looks like it's going to scream right on through, right? Which is going to harmonize and merge the Israeli military with our own.
It's going to get through. It looks like it's going through.
It looks like it at this stage.
I completely lost track of it. I'm guilty of losing track of it. Fucking hell. That's wild. That's worse than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, I would totally agree. And I think Joe Kent makes this point very, very well. He says, because he's just trying to get the Overton window open a bit. He says, look, it's totally okay for Israel to be Israel, but they have their interests, we have ours, and our interests are our interests, and their interests are their interests. They're not always overlapped perfectly, so we should make sure we have autonomy and separateness in decisions, and it's just very sensible, obviously. But I feel like we've kind of entered an age where like sensible things are, I don't know. It's like we're just in an era where like there's a lot of nonsense going on right now. It's almost like reason has left the room entirely at this point for a lot of things. I can't explain it.
No, or just people are not aware. I think we go too deep and start imagining that most people know what we know. I bet you if you just go to the average American, just walk down Times Square, just ask 20 Americans, 100 Americans there, do you know what Section 224 is? I bet you'd be lucky to get one. I think that says a lot. I think the dissemination of information is the main issue, because you could do if you're controlling what information people get, and that's why freedom of speech is so important, you can get away with anything. Like I saw a poll, I don't know if I saved it actually, just before we started. It doesn't make the point too well, but New Financial Times and Focal Data poll found that 60% or 58% of US voters believe Trump's war with Iran was not worth the cost, as the conflict continues to weigh on his approval ratings, blah, blah. 58% believe the war was not worth the cost. But that means 42% of Americans believe the war was worth the cost. I'm not saying who won the war or whether the objectives are achieved. It's worth the cost. Almost half of Americans believe that, 1 in 2. But that's like an extreme stance. It's like some things are disputed. Who's winning the war between Russia and Ukraine? Depends who you ask. There's a lot of nuances. But in terms of was the war with Iran worth it, you speak to any analyst, even the most pro-American, anti-Iranian analyst, people from the FDD would tell me the same thing. Like from an ROI perspective, looking at America's interests, it was not worth the cost. But then, so I might get, 1 out of 20 analysts that wouldn't say that. But then to have 1 or 2 Americans, it just shows that the information that the average American has, it's not only in the US, but we're just talking about the US because that's like the pinnacle of freedom of speech, free speech. Section 224 seems like a drop in the ocean.
Well, I think most people are probably
we're very cynical today, Chris. On July 5th.
July 5th, I know. Looking forward to the next 250.
Exactly, man. And the irony as well of the. Sorry, go ahead. I'll let you make the comments.
Well, it's hard because you and I and our followers, I'm sure, are very high context people, so we're tracking all of this, and I think it's hard once you really become familiar with what's actually happening and you can start to see the patterns for what they are. It's difficult not to say, wow, this is wrong. It's going in the wrong direction. I mean, just from my perspective, you mentioned, UK wants to control YouTube's algorithm, right? In the UK right now, I literally can't believe what I'm seeing in terms of who police are arresting, what they're arresting them for, which crimes they're not prosecuting, which ones they're being soft on. If that isn't an intentional dismantling of the culture of the UK, I don't know how else to interpret it. And when you see it that way, once you realize you're under attack, I don't know that there's any other proper response besides to, get angry and put up a wall around that. Or I don't know how to interpret that. But I know so many people in the UK who are considering bailing on it at this point in time because it's bad and getting worse, and they don't want to live there as it goes through its descent into wherever it's headed.
Yeah, I spoke to the producer of the movie, the Citizen one. You know which one I'm referring to? The one that Elon posted about.
Vigilante Citizen?
Vigilante Citizen. So I was speaking to the producer of that movie, and you know about obviously you know about the storyline. So it's about a person that had his family, I think, killed by a migrant, something along those lines, and then he became a vigilante. And then one of the first victims the first crimes he acts on was a woman was raped by 6 men, I think illegal immigrants, Muslim illegal immigrants, and it was inspired by the gang rapes in the UK. And then he takes matters into his own hands. He kills the judge because the judge called one of the perpetrators, one of the boys that raped the girl, also a victim. So the girl was a victim, but the boy that raped her was also a victim. So that mindset, that mind virus triggered the vigilante to kill the judge, and then he goes and not only kills the boy, but he also kills the boy and his whole family, including his mother, who posted on social media that something along the lines of the girl that was raped deserved it because of the way she's dressed. So I'm trying to get the story right. I haven't seen the movie. I've just seen clips of it. But I spoke to the producer about it. One of the questions I asked, one of the conclusions we made is like the movie, there's no risk of the movie leading to violence. It's more the movie is an indication of the mindset that people are at. Because remember, Hollywood makes movies, or producers make movies that people could relate to. To relate to a movie, that means you have to have those feelings or those thoughts already in real life. So that the mindset of people in Europe is in a very worrying place. There's another gentleman I spoke with, Mr. Oliver, I forgot his first name, but from GB News, he's been on the show a couple of times. Great guy, Neil Oliver, great guy, and he's very concerned, as in genuinely concerned, that his country, the UK, is heading towards I'm just going to say the word civil war. So it's like a taboo word no one wants to use. But and you know, you get to that level when kind of all else fails, and I feel like people are starting to feel that way. Like no matter what we do, no matter who we vote in, no matter how many times we protest, nothing changes. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So if we look at the direction things are going, you know, economically, obviously that's where a lot of people start to feel the pinch, right? And I think, you know, Trump likes to say, "Oh, the stock market's going up. That means everything's awesome." And the issue is that when you look at it, the top 10% of households in the U.S. own 93% of all the equities, right? So the stock market might be going up, and that's really good for the top 10%, but has no bearing on everybody else, pretty much, right? So it's not even like remotely a general indicator of health, right? We would be wanting to look at other things like, I don't know, are people having families? Are they starting households? Are they in the labor force? What's their happiness index? There's a lot of things you could look at. I just get the sense that the people in charge, not only I think they're actually indifferent to the plight of the average person, which is a pretty harsh statement, right? They're indifferent. Yeah. It's not even that. Sometimes I feel like, you know, you get the sense that like almost like you're an enemy of the state if you don't say exactly what the state wants. That's clearly how the UK is treating its citizenry. Like they're enemies. If you don't believe in our policies over here, you're the enemy. But I think it's worse than that. I think they're indifferent, and I don't know how we got there.
Yeah. When you speak to, so I live in my bubble. Like I don't speak to a lot of people, and the only people I speak to really are people like yourself. You know, again, people that have all this information, have all the context, or high achievers, and all the other time. And I'm in my world running my businesses and stuff. So I never really get the chance to speak to the average person about these things. I'm also not a social person, so I never sit there having a coffee or beer with friends and chat about these things. So I'll ask you a question that might sound silly to you, but it's actually some. I'd love to know the answer is, when you speak to the average American, I don't know if you get that opportunity. I'm sure you do. What do they say? How do they see things? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do they see things? How do they see where their countries are? Maybe they in a completely different mindset. Maybe they think the country's doing great. But then how do they make sense of how they're living and how the cost of living has become a lot worse? Everyone's worried for their children. People are starting to worry about AI and how their children are going to find a job. What should they learn about? What are these conversations like?
So this is a great question. It's been shifting lately. So I think just as recently as a couple of years ago, it was almost verboten. Like, we just don't talk about those things. It's impolite. Like, you know, sports, weather, kids, you know, you stick to the topics, safe topics. And then people started to slowly start to notice, they were allowed to notice this thing, that maybe the COVID jabs were not good, right? That everybody now knows somebody who they suspect had or know in their heart of hearts, you know, had a very bad reaction to those. And so you're starting to see, you can have conversations like that now. And as well, a big topic that's now totally safe to talk about is inflation, is the cost of everything, right? because it's not just the cost of milk and eggs, it's insurance. Insurance costs have exploded in the United States, home, health, auto. And so people are talking about that openly now, and that shock level is rising up the socioeconomic ladder, where I think we're starting to see a clear majority of people can talk about this stuff. So the way I think about this is, there's a guy, Ben Hunt, he put together like a really beautiful series of essays, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. And he related it around this idea of the story of the emperor has no clothes, right? And he said, this is a very, very important phenomenon, because social change happens when something comes out of what's called private knowledge. You and I talking, everybody listening, we can say whatever we want. It's still private knowledge, even though lots of people know it. Something becomes common knowledge when everybody knows that everybody knows the same thing. And then suddenly, boom, it changes, right? So in that story of the emperor has no clothes, the emissary is the kid, is the child. Everybody has private knowledge that he's naked, but until somebody yells it out, so the whole crowd knows that the whole crowd knows the same thing. And then suddenly, whoa, king's embarrassed and he walks off and all that stuff. So private knowledge was like, in the way Ben Hunt wrapped these stories up, he said, remember Harvey Weinstein? Everybody knew this guy was not a good guy. You didn't want to get caught alone in his office if you're a young starlet, right? And there were whole networks of women who would take the young starlets aside and say, hey, don't get caught in an office with this guy. Everybody knew, privately. And then it took Rose McCone saying it out loud. And all of a sudden, the Clintons didn't want anything to do with him, and prosecutors were prosecuting. And once it went into common knowledge, because everybody knew the same thing, that's when the change happened. So that's why it's so important to have these conversations like you're having, like I'm having, because we have to just say things as if we want to get to that common knowledge stage where we can just openly admit something that everybody kind of privately knows, but isn't yet there. So that's what I consider myself to be, as a common knowledge emissary. You just say things that people need to hear. And if you do that often enough and it breaks through that mindset, then all of a sudden you can have those conversations. So 2-3 years ago, if I said on a crowded bus, hey, I think these COVID jabs were harmful, I mean, you would have gotten frowny faces. I mean, there would have been all that. Now, I think you get people just kind of nod and go, oh yeah, I know that now, because it's moved out of private into common knowledge. So that's the work. The work is, how do we get these things that everybody knows to something that everybody knows that same thing.
That's so well explained. And I feel like, so if we go back to the Israel issue and the way Israel first versus America first, I think we're crossing the chasm on that front. It feels that before, no one would dare say it become anti-Semitic. But
exactly.
Now it's, slowly becoming something that everybody knows, everybody talks about. And I feel like as we're crossing the chasm, they're trying to crack down on it. They're trying to censor it, but it's a bit too late. Kind of when you cross into that, into the everybody knows that everybody knows. When you cross into that world, then it's really almost impossible to put the genie back in the bottle. Do you think we've crossed the chasm on that front, or we're still not there yet?
I think it's dangerously underway for the people who want to keep that genie back in the bottle. It's for sure one of the things that we know is that the Israel firsters, they've lost the younger generation. Almost, pretty comprehensively, right? At this point, they still have the boomers, but so we're getting that generational divide on the whole piece right there. And I think it was, astonishing how little coverage it got in this country, but just looking at the outpouring of support and mourning at Khamenei's funeral, how many world leaders showed up there, right? Like from how many different countries, and just if anything, I think it's common knowledge across the rest of the world, maybe not in the United States, but it was an enormous mistake, a strategic mistake, a tactical mistake to kill this, their supreme religious leader.
If you can play KK, can you play funeral clips? Because they are massive. 9 million mourners, according to some estimates, that have hit the streets, and obviously leaders from around the world. But that's one of the biggest. I think that the third biggest, there was one in India decades and decades ago in terms of funeral processions, the most people to attend a funeral procession. Second biggest was the death of the last supreme leader, Mujtaba Khomeini, sorry, Ayatollah Khomeini, and now Ayatollah Khamenei. He's got about 10% of Iran's population on the streets, along with world leaders from around the world. So I think that, from a strategic perspective, short-term thinking, you don't look at the consequences of this, but these are tens of millions of people that see the US in a negative light. And that is the sentiment that leads to things like 9/11. You know, I've had guests on the show, and one thing I learned in the last year really, was the fact that the main reasons Osama bin Laden did what he did, he said it himself in various writings and in interviews, is the US bases in Saudi and US intervention in the region, and number two is American support to Israel. So it's the US intervention and what the US did in the region that led to that level of hatred, that led to an act as violent as 9/11, that then led to the destructive foreign policy or self-destructive foreign policy of the US within the region. Iraq War, Afghanistan War, and we're still stuck in the region till now, decades later. And then things like the killing of the leader. There's chants on the streets in Iran, death to Israel, death to the US. We will avenge your death, dear leaders, things like that. I was watching those clips. So these are Iranians that might have been indifferent to the US, might have even liked the US. Their whole mindset changed. And for 10% of the population to be on the streets, that means a lot of these people are people that don't even like their government. They're people that maybe were on the streets in January, but they're on the streets now again. But these are things that are not being measured. When Trump talks about, I've sunk their navy, that's not even short-term thinking. That's just a marketing slogan. But what really matters are things like this: the people on the streets. And Trump yesterday, I was shocked when I saw this. I don't know if he's just talking shit or whether he means it, but he said something along the lines of, "I saw people weeping, and I don't know why they're weeping, because they're supposed to hate their government." And he's like talking like how it's bizarre. He was surprised to see people crying at the funeral. If that's true, that means the president of the United States, it's not delusional, but he's living in his own bubble, and that's pretty dangerous.
Well, even more shocking, he said out loud, again, he could have been just talking shit, but he said, oh, you know, we could have bombed them and taken them all out, but then we wouldn't have anybody left to negotiate with. So he was openly talking about bombing heads of state at a funeral procession, in a mourning session, right? Which is, that's a level of moral nihilism I think it's kind of hard to wrap my head around. That is not the leader of the free world, the people who are defending democracy. That's not the kind of statement that comes out of the people who are the people you want to be in charge of anything. I found it shocking that level.
Who said it? I know that the guy, the commentator, the pro-Israeli commentator, the one that him and Tucker fight all the time, Mark Levin. I know Mark Levin was saying that, but you're saying Trump said that as well, or just Mark Levin?
Yep. Yeah, Trump said that too.
I know Mark Levin posted something along the lines of a missed opportunity. All the leaders were there in one place. It's a missed opportunity to kill them. Something like that. He posted it today. But what did Trump say? Do you remember approximately what he said?
Yeah, if you give me a second, I can dig it up here.
Yeah, if you can. I missed that comment. Please don't tell me he said it on yesterday on July 4th during the celebrations of the 250th anniversary, because that would make it even worse. Let me find you the Mark Levin. Let me find you the Mark Levin tweet. I'll actually read that out as well. But let me see. But and oh, by the way, Mujtaba Khamenei actually didn't. Oh, there's Mark Levin. Mark Levin says, yesterday the enemy gathered en masse, all in one place. Opportunity lost. And he was quote tweeting another account on X who was saying, at Ayatollah Khamenei's funeral, the crowd chanted "Death to America." Every US ally who attended should be forced to answer questions. But this is a problem. So again, I'll read out the statement that someone said that Mark Levin is quoting. He says, at Khamenei's funeral, the crowd chanted "Death to America." But instead of reflecting on why they're calling for death to America, what did the US do to lead to millions of people making chants like this? His conclusion, instead of reflecting on what did we do to lead to all that hatred, his conclusion is every US ally should be forced to answer questions. It's just weird. It's just weird that that's the conclusion they come to, instead of the US needs to answer questions on why and what they did, what decision they made to be able to lead to so many people calling for death to America and death to Israel and death to Trump, some by name.
Yeah. So here it is. Economic Times reporting, Trump said, one shot and we can take them all out.
Oh yeah, I saw that one. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. My team put it in one of the titles for one of our interviews today. Let me get it out. I've got the whole statement. KK, you know which one you're referring to, KK? Can you send me that story? I saw it earlier. I want to open up my screen as well, but that's I'll read the whole context as well, because I was reading it literally a few hours ago. President Trump told Axios that the Iranians, quote, are begging to make a deal, but said both sides decided to take a week off. And then he says the following on the funeral. They are all there, one shot, and we can take them all out. But we are not going to do that because we would have nobody to negotiate with. But just the mindset of making statements like this, it's just, these are the things that people like Ben Gvir say. Mm-hmm. Just even if, we always give him, and I give him that kind of leeway. It's like, look, this is Trump. He speaks his mind. And, when someone speaks their mind, if I speak publicly the things I would say to my loved one, it would be perceived in different ways. But you speak a lot more freely when you speak into you. And I'm sick of this guy. Remember the Fox News, the Tucker's messages came out, what he was saying privately about Trump. So when you say these things privately, you don't say them publicly. But Trump kind of blurts everything out sometimes, because you can always give him that leeway. But there are limits when you're the leader of a country. There's a certain level of etiquette, because what you're doing is setting the precedent where this is okay. And it just makes it harder to criticize people according to death to America, for example, or the annihilation of the state of Israel. When we criticize them, they could just respond and say, hey, your own president said he wanted to wipe out a civilization to never return again. So who are you to dictate to us what we could say? So see the moral, there's a term for it, moral, whatever, that would cause the moral harm that was caused by this. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's not diplomatic. B, it's kind of a bad look all around. But C, it sends the message that says, look, when we negotiate with you, you have to accept our terms or we'll kill you. And that's not negotiating anymore, right? At that point in time. But clearly, where I think Trump should be aware at this point in time, that you and I have been aware for months now, is that the United States doesn't really have any good military options left. And so we're going to have to negotiate and possibly admit maybe it wasn't worth the cost. Maybe we shouldn't have done it in the first place, that there were lots of other avenues. I mean, let's not forget that the Strait of Hormuz was never closed, never had any tolls, never had any friction prior to February 28th of this year. So, I mean, that's the reality of the situation. So I don't understand where all this bluster goes. But last time you and I talked, we're like, well, if you wanted to keep things sort of like fiery and like cooking, this is the kind of, again, actions, not words, right? So the actions of the United States have been I would not consider that we've negotiated in good faith or with any urgency to say, hey, we got to get the strait open as soon as possible. That has not how I've perceived it so far.
We're going to get to the straits, and I want to ask you about oil prices, because I've just learned a lot in the last week, so I've got a lot of questions for you. Just one thing on that front. Are you worried that Netanyahu and Trump are meeting next week, or that worry is gone, knowing that the US has no options left, so nothing Netanyahu would say would change that reality?
So my belief system is that Israel has a very strong, compelling interest separate from ours. They want to keep the United States engaged with Iran. I don't believe that Iran has been properly defanged by Israeli standards. In fact, worse, they may be coming out of this with a bigger swagger and a sense of more power than before the war. That's certainly how I'm seeing it at this stage. So Israel's always going to be advocating for do more, and Israel's approach is always bomb first and, ask questions never, I guess. That's just how they are. And they've done that with, the West Bank and Syria and, now Lebanon and of course Gaza. So I don't know. Israel's interest is very strong to keep us involved in this whole thing. So that's that. I don't know what if Trump has to be getting talked to at this point in time, by senior military leaders saying, look, there's only so much we can do here. And I don't think there would be anything to be gained by going back into just sort of what we'd call just airstrikes, because airstrikes never really change the shape of war. They're painful, but they don't change anything. Nobody ever won a international campaign by air alone. And I can't see anything anywhere that would suggest that it makes any sense to put any boots on the ground. But if we did that, as we've talked about before, colossal mistake, it's going to be very painful, and I will regret that too, I would bet. So I don't know what the options here really are besides negotiate and give up some things that it's going to hurt a little.
Yeah. I just don't want to get too complacent, because I'm in your camp. I don't want to get too complacent because I never thought a year ago we'd be in this war in the first place. So what I would consider unthinkable, I should probably always leave on the table. But I'm in the same camp. That there's the other argument that people make is that it's a matter of when, because of the importance, we've talked about this a while ago, of the importance of the Strait of Hormuz for the US. So the cost is significant, but one can argue that the cost of not capturing the Strait of Hormuz or not causing regime change in Iran is even more significant in the long term, because it just gives the world's most important energy choke point to China. So now China still has rare earth refining, but also, and renewable energy, etc., getting miles ahead of the US and the rest of the world, catching up with nuclear energy, but also control or influence over the Strait of Hormuz. And look what we're seeing right now with the Straits. We've got the Americans trying to escort ships out of there and failing time and time again. The Straits, there was a report yesterday. I'm not sure if I've been keeping track of it, but I was looking at it yesterday. So there was a report by Kepler talking about the number of ships going through. So the number of ships going through the Strait of Hormuz is about half of what the Trump administration is claiming, and about a third of what it was before the war, so still significantly less. And then there was also yesterday, there were a few ships trying to get through the Omani side, but then they turned around and went back. Some of them just did not go back in. Others went through the Iranian side. And the Omani side completely closed yesterday. Today, a few more ships started going through, just a handful. There was one escort. But it's fair to say, the fact is Iran still controls the Strait of Hormuz. And there is that big power struggle happening right now. The Americans are trying to make some sort of offer to Iran to just give up on controlling the Strait of Hormuz. Apparently, they're dangling a carrot of lifting the sanctions in return for Iran not charging a fee. Meanwhile, the Europeans, according to Bloomberg, have already accepted that there'll be some sort of fee. The Omanis have also given a formal proposal to the US a few days ago about the new management structure, which includes fees of the Strait of Hormuz between Oman and Iran. And the only things the Europeans are looking for now is not having a fee. It's for Iran to charge the same fee to everybody. It's like, hey, please, treat us like you would treat Russia and China. Don't give preferential treatment to any countries. That's what the Europeans are allegedly requesting from Iran, whereas the US is still trying to wrestle that control away from Iran. But that gives you an idea that Iran is controlling the Straits, and the only question is, can the US really afford it, or is it worth another gamble or two?
I mean, listen, like you said, anything's possible. I've given up trying to predict this along rational lines. It would be irrational at this stage to renew attacks, but that could easily happen for reasons, And we've all seen that there's like, a little back and forth. Iran has sort of floated the trial balloon that maybe they have to preemptively attack Israel, tired of sort of, doing tit for tat. Maybe it's time to become aggressive again. We found out this last week from some satellite photos that actually the damage that Israel had sustained from those missile attacks was a lot higher, obviously, than they were admitting at the time. I think one of their main refineries up in Haifa is going to take a long time to fix. And so as we look at all of that, obviously Iran also said earlier on, I don't know if they're sticking to this, but they said, listen, if you attack us again, we're going to go after the remaining infrastructure and we're just going to take out all the energy infrastructure, right? Which is, of course, creates a global catastrophe. So nobody wants that. whatsoever. And so I can't imagine what the upside would be for the U.S. to do more attacks at this stage. I can only see pretty significant downside because obviously Iran, we, Israel and the U.S. lacked the capability to stop them from launching missiles. Tried hard, bombed a lot of sites, bombed where we thought all those missiles were stored, and they just patched up the tunnels and brought them back out and kept firing. So I think that's just the reality of the situation. The U.S. and Israel were unable to stop them from firing missiles. And if they wanted to, we also learned from satellite photos we saw last week that how accurate they were. I mean, really accurate. Not just hitting buildings, but hitting specific parts of buildings, from, 1,000 kilometers away. So that's the reality of the situation. And plus now, as we just saw with the morning processions, that it's a fairly galvanized nation as well. So those are bad sort of signs to say, well, let's keep annoying them and with these bombings. And, because I think Trump's one of his, like we mentioned last time, one of the things I love about him is that when he does speak, he has no filters. So just what he's thinking comes right out. And 2 weeks ago, he said we were 4 weeks away from real catastrophe, running out of, reserves of oil, and that would lead to very bad economic outcomes. I think all that's true. And, that's the reality right now.
There was something I learned about recently. Do you know much about the crack margin, the crack spread, how that's calculated in the oil prices? Okay, so one of my guests was telling me about it, and I have had him on the show twice to really do a deep dive into it. And his name is Philip Pilkington. And who's in the interview yesterday, he kind of went deeper into it, trying to calculate it. And based on his calculation, looking at the price of the refined oil coming out of the refineries and looking at the margin they're making, he's like, Mario, there's two logical explanations for their margins. One of them is price gouging. One of them is their cost is actually significantly higher than the spot price. And based on these calculations, etc., the how much they're paying per barrel right now coming out of the Strait of Hormuz is $110, $115 a barrel. There's no way to know for sure, but this is based on the calculation from the available data. So his argument is that the prices on the markets, the spot prices, and obviously the futures are heavily manipulated. How much? So first, do you think there is some sort of manipulation going on? Number one. Number two, what would you say is the price of the oil coming out of the Strait of Hormuz? And that links to number three, which is how long before the US, because even low oil prices doesn't mean the US is getting enough oil. The US could still be using its reserves, which are already almost completely depleted. And that means the US would lose significant leverage in any future conflict with Iran. So Iran knows that, and that gives them the upper hand in the negotiations. But I'd love to get your analysis on the price of oil and the current supply glut that everyone's talking about, because the numbers just don't show up. Like in the last 24 hours, there's been 39 ships that went through the Strait of Hormuz in the last 39 hours. So still the same average that's been going on for the last few days, which is, again, half of what the Americans are saying and a third of what it was before the war.
Yeah, let's take the so for in the price of oil, we're really quoting the futures price, which is a paper market, right? And so in the paper market, you and I could open up an account and start trading oil, right? You don't produce any, I'm not consuming any. We have no interest in it. We're just speculators, right? And so right now, the amount of speculating in the oil market is super high, right? So if you consider the signal, producers and consumers coming to a fair market price, that's the signal. The noise is people like you and I just trading who have no interest in either producing or consuming the stuff. And I get there's a point where you say, okay, it's good to have some speculators. They provide additional liquidity. That's good. It's easier to sort of make trades. But right now, the noise to signal ratio is 50-1, right? So for every barrel that's finally produced and consumed, there's about 50 that are traded off. And it's just all this paper going back and forth. Okay, that's part one. Part two is all those managed money people, the money managers, the CTAs, those are the commodity trading advisors. These are the people that are really out there doing all of this crazy paper trading. All right. That's highly subject to being manipulated if you have a big player come in who just starts just selling paper oil. And that'll make the futures price for oil go down. It just will. And there's a normal ratio that they look at, which is, okay, how many of these managed money people are bullish versus how bearish are they? That is, how many long positions have they taken compared to how many short positions are they holding? And then this chart just came out. I'm going to put up here. Just came out a couple days ago from John Kemp. And this is absolutely astonishing what we're looking at here. So what this is this is the ratio of money managers' total long and short position. So it's long divided by short. So if you see here a number like 18, it says they had 18 long positions for every short position. They were heavily long. In March 31st of 2026, they were sitting at about 12. And this is between 2011, 2026. So this is 15 years of data. So Mario, in 15 years, we've never seen a reading as low as this one we got on June 30th of 2026, where these money managers are as bearish on oil as they have been at any point in time in the past 15 years. Not just a little bit bearish, but the most bearish they've been in 15 years. Now, how do we begin to account for that? Because normally what you're doing in this market is you are saying, well, what are the risks? So we're seeing inventories get drawn down. Normally there's a ratio between the inventories and the price. We've set new records for how low the price is given where we are on the inventory curve. New records, right? Like, oh, never been here before. And as well, you and I both know that if you're in this space, these are very smart people. They have to be looking at the tanker traffic. They have to be looking at the verbiage going on back and forth. Those are risks, right? Is the risk of the strait being reclosed zero? No, it's not. It's something higher than that. So just seeing that we have max bearishness in these money managers, there's two explanations. One, they've completely lost the plot line and they've become idiots. Or two, somebody's in there selling a lot, just selling. Somebody's got a sell order in on that. Hey, just sell this. So that's when we say manipulation, to me, that would mean some entity, maybe a government, maybe Japan, maybe ours, maybe both. Somebody with deep pockets has an interest in saying, we need the price to go down. And so we're just going to we have a standing sell order. If any buying comes in, just sell it. That's how you would create that. But that chart I just showed is like, this is max bearishness at a time of literally it's one of the most elevated risk structures that I've ever seen in the oil space is an odd signal. So let me give you one other possible plausible explanation, though. In truth, there's actually a massive recession that's already been kicked off because of all of the stuff that's already happened. And that's what we're seeing is there is going to be a big dive in demand because something really got injured in the global economy. That's the other way to interpret that at this point in time. But I don't have good data for that in my economic statistics yet.
Yeah, it's not that, and there's not like a massive, at least no. There's the possibility of a big recession, but nothing too significant that would lead to those prices. Considering the risks involved, a third explanation that Philip was talking about, what he believes, is that he thinks algorithmic trading is very easy to manipulate. And that's what Trump and the administration are doing. When you feed news to Axios saying a deal's on there's a deal about to happen, there's that many ships being escorted, we control the Strait of Hormuz, we got a great deal with Iran, all these different claims. While we, the analyst that's following this closely would read these statements, we know, he's manipulating the markets, and we start making jokes about it. It's Sunday again, Monday, markets open tomorrow. Trump's going to say something positive, and then he says something positive. But what Philip's argument is that these algorithms are not taking that into consideration, and that manipulation is in information overload for the algorithms that is actually having the effect that's needed on algorithmic trading. So all these different algorithms are selling oil and bearish on oil because of this massive amount of information that talks about a massive glut in oil and a drop in oil prices and the war's over forever and all that, whereas reality is different. So that's what the market manipulation is, a manipulation of the algorithms rather than the people.
Well, that's true. And let me take it a step further, because the vast majority of these algorithms are listen, they're machine algorithms. They have no emotions. They don't really care. The vast majority of them also are not basing their positionings or their trades and all their behaviors on actual fundamentals. most of them are what are called momentum trades, right? So they're agnostic. If oil's going this way, they go this way. If oil's going that way, they go that way. And these are the machines that are actually co-located on the floor of the trading houses, right? So the Chicago Mercantile Exchange in Aurora, Illinois, there's these firms with these algos, they have machines tucked right on the floor of that, right? Just like they do at the New York Stock Exchange, et cetera. And they have really short fiber optic cables because they need to be a millisecond or a nanosecond faster than the next guy or gal, right? So that's the nature of the beast. So how easy is that to manipulate? Well, one, you do the headlines, but two, if somebody just comes in and gives a little nudge at the right time in coordination with the headline, you get everybody stampeding off in, all the algos start going this way.
What type of nudge? What do you mean by nudge?
Nudge, it's somebody just dumped. So just by way of context.
Okay. Momentum trading, yeah. So exactly. So it's like a big dump along with the news. So you put out a news saying peace deal imminent. Trump says he has a deal with Iran, and then someone gives that nudge by doing a big sell order. No, obviously a few sell orders. The algorithm catches the headline, catches the momentum, ticks all the boxes, and then the cascade begins.
Exactly. So the way that I detect this is the smallest resolution I have on my trading screen is a 1 minute bar, right? So normally there's a normal amount of volume that happens, a few hundred lots go this way or that way, right? There's normal volume, but then all of a sudden you'll see something right in coordination with those headlines, 2, 3, 4,000 lots just come piling in, right? Which is 2, 3, 4 million barrels of oil suddenly all being sold in that one little chunk of time. Well, that little chunk of time, all these other algos are looking at that going, oh, I better be on the right side of that trade. Let me get out of my longs. Let me go short too, right? And so, yeah, that's the nudge that happens.
Yeah. Interesting. I never thought of that momentum aspect of it. And then there's China as well. I
don't know what China's up to. Do you?
Exactly. I swear. It is just insane. They're just so quiet in the background. I feel like they're like steps ahead of all of us. Or maybe they're behind us. We're giving them too much credit. I don't know. I don't know what the hell's happening there. Their economy's an enigma. There's all these different cracks that people tell me about, but somehow they keep humming along.
Well, it's astonishing. So China's housing market went from super bubble territory into deep correction, and everybody said, well, that's it, because that was 30% of their GDP was just building apartments, so that should have just absolutely cratered their economy, and I don't think it did anything, and I don't understand that. It's a very weird thing. So they have a command and control economy. I think they're able to move pieces around in ways that other nations can't, because otherwise that should have really cut two at least two legs off of their stool, and nothing.
Yeah. And Jeffrey Curry, he a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the price of oil and trying to figure it out, because obviously he's been extremely long oil, and he's just surprised by how far it's dropped and how quickly it dropped. And he's telling me how, Mari, that something happened in that Trump-Xi meeting, because since then, that was the peak, around that period, 3 days plus or minus. And something happened in that meeting to not only bring down, because it already started going down, the Chinese demand for oil, but keep it down despite the low oil price. He doesn't know what it is. Doesn't know whether next month we'll have Taiwan as part of China or something completely different. But a discussion was had at that time between Trump and Xi. We just don't know what it is.
Yeah. Well, the quid was China stopping importing oil like pretty dramatically. What's the quo pro? Don't know. But I guaranteed China got something out of that. That was max leverage. So we'll see what it is.
Have you been looking at the numbers coming out of the Trump's wealth? How much money he's making from all the stock trades and stuff? Yeah, you have. Yeah,
yeah,
crazy.
When I talk about the moral nihilism, it's just insane to me that a president not only can trade stocks and then make deals, with that being not somehow completely illegal, but the volume of his trading, it's like a full-time sport. Like, you would have a hard time trading that many shares if that was your full-time job, right? So he must have somebody doing it for him, I guess. But at any rate, it's just as unseemly as it looks. And then, there's all kinds of stuff that happened with obviously the meme coins, and then this crazy thing that happened where, and this is the one that still, I don't know how to interpret this one, bothers me a lot. So there was this shooting at Brown University. And then a couple of days later, there was this professor, an MIT professor, gets gunned down at the door of his home. Oh, these two people must have known each other way back when they were both college students. That guy was the head of a fusion company. It was one of his jobs. And the competitor to that fusion company, just days later, got a $9 billion funding commitment from Truth Social, which is Trump's, it's not an energy company. It's just very weird. And I will not be surprised to find out that company, TAE Systems, ends up with a big contract at some point. I mean, we've seen enough examples of this. Like, this is now a thing.
Look, I've said this, I say this a lot. The more I do, obviously, what I'm doing and talk to the people that I talk to, and especially when I have these private conversations, the more I realize how much is happening behind the scenes. It is wild. It's not, I'm not in the belief that there's a few people pulling the strings. It's that easy. They meet in one room and make decisions. But I definitely don't believe that the system is perfect and decentralized and fair as I used to believe 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Yeah. The reality of it, just there's a lot there when you understand things like how much influence certain people have, how easily they can be impacted. Let's just give you a silly example. There was a video a few hours ago. I saw it. There was a video of, I don't know if you could find it, KK. It's a video of Trump, as Fox News filming Trump watch himself on Fox News. Did you see that?
Okay, I saw a still picture of it.
I gotta see the video. Let me see if I can find it. KK, if you can find it, it's the most hilarious thing. Oh, there it is. There it is. If you can please play this, KK. Show it on screen. The reason I mention it right now is, and I want you to play it, KK, while I explain it. And this is not the best example because I'm talking about private conversations and private decisions being made, and they're pretty much people that do pull the strings. Just it's not as simplistic as people make it out to be. But this is a smaller example of it. So this is Trump watching Fox News, and on Fox News is filming. It's him being filmed watching Fox News and waving Fox News. You can't make this shit up. So now the reason I mention this is the person that is influencing the world the most right now and will be for the next couple of years. And his mind that is coming up with these decisions is being influenced by Fox News and people speaking on Fox News. So this gives you an idea of the network alone has the ear of the president of the United States. So much so, and I can't remember who told me this. I think it's public information, is that people that want to influence Trump, I think it's public, but people that want to influence Trump would get on the right spot or on the right segment on Fox News and say something specific to get his ear. That was one of the ways to do it. Other ways is like, buying Trump Social, buying membership to his club or Son's Club and all that. But that was the way to get the president's ear. And again, this is an innocent example that I don't have much of a problem with. This is just how the system works. I want to say more sinister examples, but the examples I've started getting a better idea of is like the conversations that she and Trump have. That if we were on a fly on that wall and we'd hear the conversation like, number one is holy shit. Number two, now it makes sense. So this is something I'm realizing more and more. And this kind of, even if you go some of my private conversations made me realize the process that led to Trump to start the war in Iran, who had his ear on the power struggle and who had his attention more, etc. And there's some truth to what people say. The person that has Trump's ear last has the most influence. It's not as simple as that, but it does speak. There's some truth to it. The truth is like having his ear, especially at the right time, has an impact. So yeah, it's just fascinating to see. And then it links to the whole oil price discussion, what's happening in the markets and the corruption we're seeing with the presidency as well. It's kind of, I feel like we're starting to see reality more and more.
I'd agree, but Mario, how much power do you think Trump actually has? Is there a force larger than him we have to discuss or consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I've realized that, and you've been speaking about it for a long time, but I've realized that as well more and more. Joe, Ken, Tucker, etc., have done a great job explaining it, and they've kind of woke me up even further to it, like how much influence there is over him. But yeah, freaking hell yeah, like absolutely, man.
Yeah, he's the lightning rod, and we're like, look what Trump is doing, but actually, there's a machine operating somewhere in the background. That's carrying us along in this story, and so, again, you know, sort of maybe the larger framing on this is like here's what I'm worried about from an oil price perspective. What I'm worried about is that, you know, we're draining our SPR, we're draining our commercial stockpiles, we're draining our inventories of gasoline and diesel. They're all at like multi-year, if not multi-decade lows at this time of the year. And so I'm worried that we're just going to keep this fictitious low price of oil, which keeps demand high, right? So in the United States, year over year demand amongst the citizenry for oil products was up 2.9% year over year, not down 2.9%, not down 5 or 6%, which is probably where it needs to be. It's higher than ever, right? Jet flight miles driven, like we're just, hey, the price is not nearly high enough to cause any sort of demand destruction. In fact, demand is higher. And that's kind of true worldwide as well. We're seeing, I can't find this demand destruction, so we're just eating into our stockpiles. And my concern is that we just keep that up, and then, oh no, something goes wrong with the negotiations, the MOU falls apart, and, you know, things get spicy over there again for a bit. And next thing you know, we just slam into oil shortages across the world, but here in the United States as well. You know, we just hit tank bottom. And that's probably one of the most destructive things I could imagine. It would be highly irresponsible to end up there because somebody said, let's, you know, manipulate oil futures lower for some short-term political gain. You know, we want to get through the July 4th weekend, you know, being able to crow about how, you know, oil prices were low and then we'll let them go, or whatever the story is. That I can't. So again, if we get to that point, this is a big if, big scenario, but if we get there and we slam into that, and that was because of, I don't know, we'll just call it ignorance, right? We just got there because it was just some broken process, or it was intentional because somebody was actually trying to engineer that outcome because, you know, Washington, D.C. never let a good crisis go to waste. However we get there, you know, in your heart of hearts, there are people behind there who are going to be all ready for this crisis, air quotes time, right? Oh, good thing we put all those flock cameras in because now we can see if, you know, Joe Blow was trying to like evade the system and he drove too much or more than his allotted amount, or tried to get around, you know, the purchasing requirements, minimums, maximums that we had in place for gasoline, whatever the story is. You just know that next crisis is going to be an opportunity to really use the data centers, use the flock cameras, use the whatevers. And you already heard, I think, Marco Rubio coming out talking about how passports now, well, we'll just use this facial recognition thing now. You don't have to go to Walgreens anymore. You know, that digital future state, that's something they want, whoever the they is in this story. But that's something they want. And we know that because when they want something, it's always easy, right? It's just easy. Data centers popping up. It's almost impossible for locals to organize against them. All sorts of inconvenient narratives like climate change. Suddenly they took those right off the table. Like, stop talking about that, right? That's easy. If you want to do something else, though, that they don't want, it's always hard. It's like selling raw milk. Man, that's hard, you know, or something. Yeah. So that's the easy, hard framework that we use over at my site with my tribe. And we talk about that because when things are easy, that's just something that they want. So yeah, I guess they want, you know, data centers and flock cameras at this point, you know, figure out why.
Yeah. Yeah. Well explained. Chris, thanks for jumping on. I always enjoy our conversations. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me again.
Can't wait to do this again. All right, guys. Karen Kwiatkowski, how are you?
Except a little depressing listening to what Chris was talking about. Oh my God. And
he's right. He's incredible. Yeah. It's something I'm discussing more and more because it's just true. It's like if he told me at the beginning of the conversation that Section 224 seems like it's going to pass. So I'm like, if Section 224 is going to pass, one of the most obvious, stupid, bad things for the United States for the average person. Like if you go to an average American on the street and say, hey, there's a section that says XYZ and that's going to pass and become law, they'd be like, no freaking way. You're making shit up. No, it's actually about to pass. If that passes, how the hell we're going to prevent censorship or having that, I wouldn't say autocracy, but kind of that level of control by the government that we believe will never happen in a country like the United States, that is based on the foundation of liberty and freedom, it's concerning. And now, and it all started with the visit, because BIBI's visiting Trump early next week, so that's never a good thing. And then you've got also Trump just a few days ago saying about the funeral. So that was a massive funeral. You saw the funeral for Ali Khamenei, yeah?
Yeah, I can't even.
9 million people.
Yeah, that's what I saw. That's 1/10 of the population, just under 1/10. So imagine that in Washington. That would be like 35 million people coming to DC.
Exactly. Have we ever seen that in the United States, that level of mobilization for anything?
No, I remember maybe it was under Obama where we had a 1 million man march, and they used to have there for a couple, 3 years, we had 1 million man marches, and I forget what they were about, probably civil rights or something, but could have been anything. Anyway, they didn't quite make 1 million. They were almost 1 million, and that was kind of the target goal. And I think they don't have those, but that's less than 1 million. That was probably the biggest thing in my lifetime. So this is just incomprehensible, really. And then you see from a distance, and you see where people. It's crazy. But
we're talking about how like maybe the government was not popular before, but like this is the cost of this war. Like all these people, how do you think they look at the US? A lot of people in Iran used to love the US, and so many of them Israel too. How do you think they see the US and Israel now?
Oh yeah, I mean, how can they? That's what assassinations of political or civil rights leaders, Martin Luther King, his assassination brought out crowds. I mean, that people felt that, even people that didn't even support Martin Luther King, they still felt like they'd been personally attacked. And that wasn't from another country. Can you imagine if another country had come in and killed an American figure, whether 60 years ago or right now? It's just, I think we don't understand the ramifications of our policies, and we don't even try to, because it's very easy to understand them. You just, look at some case studies, and this is totally, I think, predictable, and also, I was watching some of the guys, English speakers who are there, broadcasting stuff, and one of them had some pictures of parts of Tehran that had been really destroyed, hit hard, and not, haven't had a chance to really build them back. And you think about the number of average Iranians that have also died, and of course the children. You can't get away from the Manab 168, but it's not just that. I mean, they've had other families and children, men, women, and children targeted. So they've lost a lot, and they lost their leader. And this is almost, I mean, it's understandable in some ways. In another way, for Americans, though, it's not understandable, because this is their religious leader. We don't have an American religious leader. I think Trump with MAGA, maybe he thought he was going to do that, but we don't have a single religious leader in the United States that everyone respects and honors and feels connected to and has confidence in. We don't have anything like that in our country. And so when this assassination was executed, we took out not just the political top dog, in a sense, but the religious inspirational leader, the one who puts together what it means in this day and age, what it means to be an Iranian, and also he's the symbol of all those years of suffering and sanctions and everybody saying bad things about Iran. And he led his country through really a desert, you could say. So like a Moses figure almost. And Americans, we don't think in those terms. We don't, we have freedom of religion. That means freedom not to have a religion. That's what a lot of Americans think about. And they don't, we don't even imagine that countries like Iran even exist, where they are not just bound in a political state structure, but they're also bound in a religious construct. And, you know, it's interesting because the Christians, the Jewish communities, the other religious communities that exist in Iran all have representatives here. They're all paying, you know, their respects and homage to the Ayatollah. So, yeah, I don't think, I mean, it's like our government. I mean, why do we have highly educated and highly paid people in government? Don't they know that this? Don't they? I don't think they even have any concept. Trump seems very surprised. Oh, I thought everybody hated him. How can he possibly be that stupid, that ill-informed, even on his own, but much less with the whole system of U.S. intelligence and U.S. Policymakers able to communicate to him? And how could we all be that stupid? It just makes it's very, very it's incomprehensible, really.
Yeah, it's concerning. For when I saw him say that, there's like two theories for me. I'm like, either he's just saying the truth, he genuinely is surprised, or he's just saying it because politically, you know, he's just saying things just political, just trying to make a point. But if it's the first, if he was genuinely surprised by this, it concerns me, because you worry that the person that has so much influence around the world is actually living in an information bubble. And I don't think people understand how dangerous it is to be misinformed, the dangers of ignorance. When you have someone making decisions, you know, thinking, hey, if I kill their leader, they're all going to collapse like Venezuela, I'm going to control their oil. Decisions like this lead to, false assumptions like this lead to decisions that have severe consequences. The consequences of this war, that was meant to be a quick 4-day war, whatever it is, 1 week, 2-week war, are going to be felt for years and decades. As I said, those millions of people are going to have the wrong perception, not wrong, a very negative perception of the US. They're actually chanting on the streets, death to Israel and death to the US. And some of them saying, we're going to avenge our dear leader and go after President Trump, etc. Yeah. You've just created that hate in millions of people. And I was telling Chris earlier that, 9/11, when Osama bin Laden, when he gave the reasons, when someone does something evil, you'd want to ask him, like, hey, why did you just freaking do this? And he told the world, he's like, hey, I did this because the US is causing a lot of death and destruction in our region, has bases in our holy land in Saudi. That's our land, it's Muslim land. And, it's killing a lot of Muslims through all these different wars and backing all these different proxies. And number two is the support for Israel, which is doing what it's doing to Palestinians in the region. And that only got worse since, by the way, just to be clear. That was back then. And, 20 years later, look where Palestinians are at. So instead of learning from this and just trying to change our foreign policy or America's foreign policy, we just I feel like we're just doubling down on that path. And it's to what end? When will things change? That's a big question. Like, when will we really disengage out of the region? We thought we'll disengage, the US will disengage after this war with Iran. Well, there's a new deal that the US signed up to in Lebanon. Get the hell out of Lebanon. Let the Lebanese figure it out. You've caused enough mess. There's meetings with al-Shara trying to figure out a plan there and telling al-Shara to go into Lebanon. There's talks about how to deal with the Houthis, visits to the Gulf regions, continuing work on the Iran deal and trying to enforce America's control over the Strait of Hormuz unsuccessfully so far. And now BIBI's going to Trump. Trump should even just say no to Netanyahu's visit. Like, you visited me last time, you got me into this freaking war. Let's just have a phone call. let's avoid meeting one another. Well,
Ben-Gvir didn't go. Ben-Gvir didn't go to New York. He canceled his New York trip.
Yeah, I saw.
They were going to arrest him. So I think there's some things that we don't measure if we only look at what the government policy makers are doing, because clearly, we are expanding military footprint in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Israel, in Jordan, beefing up the base we have in Jordan there. Where else? But we are I don't think Rubio's trip was successful in telling the Gulf states what they need to do. I think they pretty much nodded and thanked him and then continued to do what they were going to do, which is to balance their foreign policy much more closely with their neighbors and with the regional. So I think that is happening. I think our retreat is right now eastward, not all the way back to Washington, but eastward, at least into the where Israel can fly an airplane, drop a bomb, and not have to be refueled on the way back. We're moving to that. So we are seeing a little bit of a shift in our foreign policy. The language and the leadership has not woken up to what everybody else in the world is waking up to. Trump. Well, first off, Trump has. I think, we talked about this before, his whole Carg Island thing was invented in late 1980s, and he never let it go. It was like, I got a good idea, I'm gonna hold on to it. So for the next 50 years or whatever. And he did. Okay. He says, once he gets an idea that he thinks is good, then he checks that box.
Do you think Netanyahu can play on that card to try to convince him again on Iran? Does that worry you?
Well, no, I think Trump, he likes to, Trump never blames himself, right? Trump never makes a mistake. It's always somebody around him who's done something wrong. They've told him wrong, or they led him wrong, or they were in it for their own business. They didn't flatter him enough. That's why he didn't listen. Whatever it was, it's never him. It's always somebody else's fault. So he is not happy with Netanyahu. And I've said this before, but Netanyahu is not a winner here. He's very unpopular at home. Trump is now, this is something Trump is aware of. He doesn't understand his potential enemies or people that he wants to attack or regime change. He has no interest in how those countries actually work or what they think. He doesn't care about that. But he does have an interest in Israel, partly because Israelis, Zionists have given him a lot of money. He's benefited from them throughout his whole life. So he has a connection there. Many of his friends, his son-in-law, are avid Zionists. He trusts them. So he pays attention to Israeli politics, and Netanyahu is very unpopular. Trump tells the nation, I'm the most popular guy. He's still out on all his speeches are like, look how great everything is. And you watch him, if you're an American and you watch him, you go, well, that's not true. That's not true. What do you mean a jobs, economy, stock market? That's how you make, he said he made all his money because the stock market went up. I mean, my God. So a lot of people don't believe what he says, but he's big on how popular he is. But he does pay close attention to how popular Netanyahu is not, which he isn't. I mean, his government, they're going to have elections. There's, I'm not saying Netanyahu's coalition couldn't squeak through, but basically he's not popular. Trump knows this, and Trump does not associate with losers. This is just his operational policy. If you're a loser, I'm going to humiliate you, publicly torture you or whatever. I'm going to have fun with you like a cat with a mouse, but I'm not going to really hang with you. I'm not going to defend you. I'm not going to help, try to make you more popular than you are. This is why we see this all the time when he endorses in primaries or when he makes an endorsement in a domestic race. He always waits until the numbers pretty well show that his candidate is going to win, and then he does it. So in some ways, he's not a risk taker. And I think he may call Netanyahu. He may end up canceling Netanyahu's visit or have a visit with Netanyahu that's not the typical, I pull out my chair in the Oval Office and, it's all deferential. So because Trump is a blamer, and I think Netanyahu is getting some of the blame for this. And Trump, I'm just saying this based on what he's been saying, well, look how much we've done for Israel. Vance is echoing some of this. We've done everything we could possibly do for Israel. They should show some gratitude. Remember when Vance said that 3 weeks ago? So this kind of messaging is floating around in Trump's head. So this visit may not be.
Yeah, but it just depends. So I've been saying what you're saying, but that's based on looking at it from the outside. And then there's another way of looking at it. Another lens is, some people say, what does Netanyahu have on Trump? Other people say, how much influence does Netanyahu and the lobby have on Trump? Other people say, how much does Trump even matter really in those conversations? How many of the decisions does he make versus others in that beast, in that system that is the United States? So there's all these questions that are up in the air that make it difficult to, I don't know, I feel like if it was just Trump calling the shots, then why did we even get into this war? If it was Trump that said no more forever wars and I want the Nobel Peace Prize for ending wars, how are we even here?
Yeah. Well, we have the Congress also bought and paid for. They like the war. The military industrial complex supports them. They like the war. So there's a lot of folks interested in making money in war, but that also assumes that you are going to make money. There are systems that, there's two things going on, I think, in our military industrial complex. One is this outrageous amount of money going into not just AI, but computing and information technology of all types. And that is not, You can make a lot of profit there, but ultimately your manufacturing of that is zilch. Okay. It's not like a job creator. Okay. So as the military industrial complex needs fewer people, employs fewer people at home. Yeah, sure, there's still profit for the guys at the top, but you're not actually employing a bunch of people. And that's a problem, because we hate the rich. All countries that have poor people pretty much look at the rich folks that are skimming off the top, particularly in government with government contracts. They don't like them. Like if I say Alex Karp, most people who know who he is have a negative perspective on this guy. And he's not the only one. Peter Thiel, who, is a fellow libertarian, I guess, or what he was years ago. Peter Thiel's a bad guy. Most of the people that hate Vance, the main reason they hate him is because he's a product of Peter Thiel. His political career was subsidized by Peter Thiel. So anyway, these guys who are working kind of for the new totalitarianism in our country, that's the next phase of the military industrial complex. They're not popular, and Congress can't do everything at once for them because there's no job benefit to do that. These data centers, nobody in America wants data centers. And it's not just because they use up your water and drive up your electricity bills. It's also because you can take a massive data center, put it somewhere, and they say, well, how many jobs are we going to get for all those billions and billions of dollars? And it's like anywhere from 50 to 85 people. And what are those jobs? Well, they're kind of like air conditioner repairmen. Okay. They're walking around, making sure all the systems are running. These are not high-tech jobs. So data centers have a problem in selling how great they are, because they make profit for very few and they don't create jobs. So our military transition is away from construction of things, because we don't have we've abandoned that for the most part. It's going to take decades to really get shipbuilding back or sub building back. And we certainly can't beat what the Russians, the Indians, and the Chinese can do. We can't beat that. So we're going to be doing more purchasing with our military dollar, more purchasing, more IT and totalitarian surveillance type stuff, which is huge profit for few people and very few jobs. And so when you wean people off of those those defense jobs, and the baby boomers start to die off, and they're not worried, they just care about their Social Security check, they're good. So then you have people disconnected from their government, which is how you get revolutions. And Congress knows this. The Congress members know this. You're seeing it all over in these races. How in the world did the Democratic Socialist win the Democratic primary in Colorado? Well, how did she do that? Well, it's a Democratic district, so she and the Democrat argued democratic principles, and she had the lead on justice. She had the lead on our government should not be taking our tax dollar and murdering babies in Palestine, bombing countries for no reason, and enriching the elites. Right? That's the Democratic Socialist message. Guess what? Very popular. It sells. And if you had a bunch of people in a military town who were all making money off the military base, and lots of people had good jobs making weapons, old style weapons, then they would fight back. They would say, no, I like this, but they can't fight back because those jobs aren't there. So as we blew up all of our antique stuff, both in Ukraine and lost a lot of what we thought were good systems and technologies, they were shown not to be as effective, and they got blown up. Pete Hegseth wants, $2 trillion to redo military acquisition. But what's he going to do with that $2 trillion? Let's assume he gets $2 trillion, even if the Israelis get half of it, right? Because this is a whole different issue, the Israelis in our system. That's also the totalitarianism that's coming. We'll have to deal with it. But the money that Pete Hegseth will spend, a lot of it's going to go to the AI and the IT stuff, which doesn't hire a lot of people, doesn't create jobs. AI can write a code. I mean, you could hire an AI company with 10 people and they can do what, 1,000 or 2,000 people might have done before that, or maybe 100,000. I don't know. We also are going to have to upgrade into drones. Well, how do we do drones? It's off the shelf, commercialized, get an LLC, buy somebody else's stuff, stick an American part on it, and now you have an American drone, right? We copy like we did the Shahed drones. We copied those. So that also does not create a lot of high-paying jobs. That kind of manufacturing is just like with cars and other things. You got robotics to do it, computers to do it, 3D printing to do it. You don't need people working at that. So that money that Trump is going to pour into the military, that Hegseth wrote a really insane article about how great the military was and how they were going to use all that money and how accountable they were for it, that is not going to equate to jobs. And so now you have further disconnection between DC and the 5 wealthiest counties in the United States around DC, and then all the rest of the people. So Congress depends on those people to vote for them. And that's the wild card. That's what, of course, AIPAC and Israel are worried about. That's why they have to spend $1 million to do Hasbara, to make sure people are not alienated by Israel or whatever. But this connection, these congressmen, and it's not just the ones that are they're hoping to get reelected. It's their competition. It's their competition like that Democratic Socialist. It's the competition like Mamdani. You're like, oh, how could New York do that? Well, I don't know how New York could do that. But guess what? Apparently, something Mamdani said was way more appealing than what the other guy said. So why was it appealing? Why would, knocking the elite off of their ivory towers, why is that appealing? Because really, I mean, capitalism, we tolerate it. It's not a bad thing. But when it becomes abused and when it becomes a target of why I don't have anything, why I have all the student debt, whatever your thing is, then politics change. And so Congress will respond to that. And we will elect a president, perhaps, or have one that almost gets elected in 2028, who is going to tap into that, much like Trump tapped in years ago.
But then what happens is when that new president with that messaging similar to Mamdani takes the office and then reverts back to the same policies, because remember, Trump was that person.
Yeah, he was.
Then people will just completely lose their shit, because I think people are just the edge. They're just really fed up by voting a different person every time, getting the same result.
Yeah, they are fed up with it. And I'll tell you, I watched your really fantastic interview with Barnes, with Robert Barnes.
Oh, Robert is great. Yeah.
And he says, oh, it won't be 2028. It'll be the one after that, probably. But we are in a place of, we're transitioning. Our country is changing. And actually something has already changed, which government is not adapted to. And that is Americans don't want war. This Iran war was unpopular from the beginning. And even after some people, we had 13, supposedly 16 casualties or something. But even after that, and all the political Fox News, everything, the war, we have to beat these terrible Iranians. And of course, we did not beat them. But I'm just saying that in no point did that war become more popular with Americans than it was. It became even less popular after the president started it, after the deep state started, after Israel started it. So, that's different. That's different. That is a fundamental coalescing of a true America first type of perspective in this country. That's got to be dealt with. And if they don't deal with it, that's right. It'll be revolutionary. And I don't know. I hate flock cameras. I thought Chris was talking about, the flock cameras and stuff. But, people, if there's anything that people can strike out at, and obviously we're not going to go shoot all the elites. That's not something, a few might do that, very few. But how many people or teenagers or old folks are able to take out a flock camera? And I don't mean take it out, just damage it so that it doesn't work. Those targets are everywhere and they're not protected, except obviously by other flock cameras. But, this movement is very interesting. And it's not necessarily good, but it's just the way it is. Our government has alienated the people. But I agree with you back to Iran, though, that, it's heartwarming and amazing to watch, and sad to see how the people are participating and sharing their grief. But at the same time, you're getting messages, particularly from the IRGC and others, and the people with the Down with America or whatever. This is the end of the grieving ceremony for the most part. Once this is done, then we go forward. We've finished the rebuilding and we deal with what's been done to us, not just to Khamenei, but to the people of Iran. And there's a lot of language which Americans should totally understand that says we're getting even, or we're going to take revenge.
Just for people listening, what did the US do when 9/11 happened? Wars that killed tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people. What do you think the US would do right now if a country came in, killed Trump, and bombed a school?
Well, we would probably
that country will be wiped out.
It would. And so we wouldn't play little military float your boat over there and try to blockade something. We wouldn't do that. No, I think our government is really irrational in so many ways. And so we would probably nuke them. We would turn them into a parking lot. And guess what? Probably if something like that happened, 70% of the population would cheer it. Maybe not 70, maybe 20 years ago, 70. Now, maybe at least 60%, maybe 55 would cheer it. There are a lot of people in America who understand there's a big difference between what Washington says wars are about and what they're really about. I mean, we have multiple generations of folks, Vietnam generation, the first Iraq war generation, second Iraq war, Afghanistan generation, and now our younger people who all know everything there is to know about the genocide in Gaza, and yet are powerless to do anything about it. So you've got all these waves of people who understand that our government lies, and they lie particularly about war, and it's usually because they're profiting from it. So it is possible that if something like that happened, Americans would take that opportunity to, which is what we want them to do with regime change, right? We go hit somebody, we knock off their leader, we put them in a war. We say, oh, you're going to rise up and throw your government out. Well, wouldn't that be interesting if somebody hit us and we're going to fight back, but then also we did a regime change at home. Those techniques of regime change usually don't work, but the psychology of regime change, we aren't immune from that in this country. We are not immune to it at all. I mean, honestly, I can't think of a single country, regardless of what they did to us, that would cause young Americans to rush down to the recruiting offices and sign up to join the military. I don't see it. And we saw that after 9/11. But at the time of 9/11, sure, we had cell phones. We had the internet, but we hadn't had it for very long. I don't think I did much on the internet before 1995.
No, not even close. The access of information was very different than to what it is now, incomparable.
And so the narrative control from Washington through the main, CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, they were all
convince the Americans that Iraq made sense.
Yeah, well, they did, and they lied, and it was known that they lied because I was one of a number of people that were. I was just a tiny portion of, actual paid journalists who were doing their job globally and in the United States were, pointing out that a lot of what we were being told wasn't true. But we didn't have the countervailing impact of being able to find out for ourselves. You couldn't just go on the internet and find out. You couldn't, but see, now we can not only do that, we can actually talk to people in other countries. We can read what they're saying. We can watch them live. We can ask them questions. There's just amazing the connectivity that we have. So I think, and again, I would have thought that the COVID thing would not have gone as smoothly as it did from the government's perspective. I thought more people would have pushed back, and they didn't. So fear is a problem. But even with COVID, there was a whole bunch of people who bought the COVID lies who have since then come out of that stupor and realized that, oh my God, the government just said that because it had an agenda, which we're not quite sure what it was. Maybe it was to enrich big pharma or kill old people. We're not sure what the agenda was. We don't know. But it had something that it wasn't really telling us. And it was also misleading us and taking advantage of our fear. So every little thing that happens, the world changes, the technology, the connectivity, the information, all these things, they make us a slightly different people in a slightly different political environment. So I'm not 100% sure if we had attack. And I'll tell you this, I don't wish any harm on anybody, including Trump or any of the administration officials. And there's many of them that I despise. But if you just take Trump alone, he's such a lightning rod for antipathy and hatred amongst the people in this country, not the MAGA people. I've admitted and apologized for voting for him. But a lot of people did not vote for him. They had Trump derangement syndrome or whatever, and they really don't like him. They look at all the negatives that he brings to bear, which are many. So, you remember the guy that shot the United Healthcare CEO? I guess he's having a trial.
Luigi.
He's accused of it. Who knows what really happened? But the guy's going to be
Luigi Maglione or something.
Yeah. But when that happened, and I paid very little attention to, I don't know a lot about big pharma or healthcare insurance companies. I didn't know who this guy was. But what surprised me was the outpouring of support for the Luigi guy, the one who was accused of doing it. Not that he was innocent. They were just assuming that he did it, and they loved it. He did it. They said, this guy's
worrying.
Yeah, that's
very
extremely
worrying.
So I'm not sure that if you killed an unpopular president, and I don't know anyone that hasn't been, none of them.
Oh, look at people celebrated. There's some people that celebrated the killing of Kirk. How messed up is that?
Oh yeah, well there you go. That's I hate to say that
was a crazy time. Yeah, exactly. But that was a crazy time.
There were a lot of people, and again, the left wing types or Democratic Party types, or even some of the Rhino types that didn't really like Charlie Kirk or what he was doing. And they saw, and what labels did they give him? Well, he's probably, a white supremacist. He might be a racist, and certainly he's a troublemaker, but turned out they didn't know him. They didn't listen to his speeches. They didn't know him. But they were able to put him in a category to instantly say, I don't like this guy, and then move to the next stage when he got killed to celebrate it. I think that's great. Why don't we, too bad they didn't get his kids or something, terrible things. Now, I don't like to think of my country as being filled with people like that, but unfortunately, we have a lot of people like that. And I'm not saying they would hate anybody that's killed, maybe if Bernie Sanders, that they would be upset about that. But the way they went after, the way they supported the guy that killed the United Healthcare guy, assuming he's the one that did it, they celebrated that. And given the way Trump is held in contempt by so many people in our own country, mainly because he lies so much. I think, you can't just keep telling people how great it is with no context, because so many people are not feeling it. They just don't think it's great. They have evidence in their own lives that it's not great. And they see you making a lot of money, quote unquote, on the stock market, doing things like, that even Biden couldn't get away with. I mean, we had the Hunter Biden thing with Ukraine.
Exactly. Trump takes it to a whole other level. Other level. It is insane the amount of money they're making. I made a joke to
I really is
today because I was having a private conversation earlier. I'm like, and we were told certain information. And in my mind, like, you can never trade on that information. It's not legal. So something I don't even consider. But I put a joke, off the cuff joke. I'm like, just imagine if we were in Trump's circle, we'd be able to trade on all that information, because it's just wild the amount of money they're making, and they just trade on everything with just complete impunity. So it has taken it to a lot other level. Even I think the Iran war itself is not. Look, presidents break promises all the time. Bizarrely and unfortunately, the American voters are it's expected from a president to break campaign promises. It's just a matter of which ones and to what extent. But when you break the biggest promise that you make to the voters, that's different. So it's like you go to someone, you're like, hey, I'm going to do this, but the most important thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do that. That will be my main focus. And you go ahead and first thing you do is you just break that so blatantly. I just feel like it's and I was saying this to Chris earlier, it did break a lot of people, and everything's possible now. Like that meeting between Netanyahu and Trump, I believe, and as you know, I've been saying it for a long time, that I think the war is over. I'm still in that camp, but I wouldn't discount that it might not restart next year, or there might not be something like Israel was meant to pull out of Iran. Israel's still, pull out of Lebanon. Israel's still there. Israel's still bombing Lebanon, a lot less than it was. So it is abiding to an extent by a ceasefire, but a lot less so. Netanyahu proudly said today in his speech, he said the following. Let me get that for you. He says, where is it? Okay, Iran wants to remove us from southern Lebanon, and they are trying to put pressure on the U.S. We are handling this pressure well. We have received legitimacy to maintain the security zone from our great achievement against Lebanon, but they will try to eliminate it in every way, including putting pressure on the Lebanese government. And then he says, I heard reports in the media claiming that Trump asked us not to take action against terrorist tunnels in Lebanon. That about not demolishing villages. That's what the claim is in the New York Times. That's a myth, fake news. He didn't say anything to me about it. And I didn't ask him. We act according to our considerations. So here we are believing, and then he says another statement, there will be no reconstruction in Gaza without disarmament and demilitarization in the designated area. So when you see statements like this, you look at all the rhetoric we've seen a few weeks ago, Karen, and then you look at the actions that follows.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed. Nothing seems to have changed.
Nope. And and I don't know what it will take. Obviously, if Trump wanted things with Israel to change, that relationship could be shifted, even despite AIPAC. It doesn't even matter about that. Trump could, just from executive power that he has already, could suspend and halt and threaten to halt and all these things. And this relationship does provide the United States, since we're providing the oversight and the political support and the aid and the military spending and the cash and the Israeli bonds, all the things that the U.S. is providing. Each one of these things is a leverage point that could be leveraged to get Israel to get back in their borders and start behaving like a normal country. But Trump doesn't do that. So he doesn't want to do it, or he can't do it. Well, if he can't do it, maybe that's why he's getting himself so rich. Maybe he needs more money, because otherwise he can't build a bunker that's secure enough to prevent him from being assassinated by his people in Israel who are threatening him. So that's
is that something you I'll ask you a question that Chris asked me. How many of the decisions he makes are his own decisions in your mind?
Yeah, well, I used to think every Truth Social tweet that he made was his, because of the weird way that he writes them, right? He puts capital letters where you wouldn't have capital, unless you're writing in German. You wouldn't put, Americans, we don't use capital letters and everything. We don't boldface stupid things, and we don't speak in that kind of halted, weird language that he uses, that nobody texts or write. Well, okay, the patsy that killed Charlie Kirk did write texts very similar to the way Trump writes them. So maybe, I'm not saying Trump did it, but there may be a family of writers that write Truth Social posts. I'm not sure, but I did think he was writing those. He was producing those because of the way they're written. And I know older people, sometimes people older than me, write weird stuff. I don't know. And Trump has a big personality. I thought maybe he was expressing, but it turns out I'm not sure he does that either. I think that whole part of some of his writings are produced for him by others. I think maybe when we think about the Trump presidency, we need to look at all the members of the Trump Board of Peace, because that's most of the White House staff, plus Trump's relatives and his best friend Wickoff. So, and his kids, I guess, are in part, Kushner, son-in-law. So if you look at the Trump Board of Peace and the membership of that, then you have a circle that includes all the inside staff at the White House, plus Trump's relatives. And I think that's really what's governing us. And it's smaller than an oligarchy. I mean, it is an oligarchy of a sort, but it's a really small, and then it interfaces with the other powers. So, yeah, but I do think Trump, or fear of Trump, is keeping some kind of discipline in the White House. Like, don't piss Trump off or he'll fire you. So there is some kind of consistency in how they're going to behave. We must please Trump. So whatever's on Trump's mind, how do we sell it to Trump? If we want to put something in his mind, how do we make him think he thought it up? How do we sell it? But all of this there's a small group of people doing that, not a large group. See, if there was a large group of people doing that, that would be like a more normal presidency or whatever. Yeah, where you have a guy that, let's say, he goes out to the countryside, or he meets with the governor, and he comes back with a really cool idea that he never thought. Yeah, so I met with the governor, and I know he's a Democrat, but the guy, he gave me an idea, right? You could see that happening with the normal presidency or any leader, but we don't see that with Trump. Trump's ideas are coming from a very small and narrow circle of heavily populated with Zionists, and of course that's a military state, constantly under risk by neighbors. It's always in a lifetime, existential survival battle, that way of thinking. Very high tech, very interested in financial things and dealings and in money and global control of via the financial system, that kind of thing. I mean, that Israel is interested in that. Trump is interested in that. So this is a little circle that kind of feeds itself ideas, and no really new ideas come into it. And I think that's the big problem. But so I don't know if Trump's completely in charge, but he does have a way of limiting the people that influence him. He's not really bringing in new people. And I'm going to say something really sexist, I guess it is. But you know how all the presidents, and even I remember Bush Jr. did this, they always want to talk about how many women they brought into the government, or, if blacks or Hispanics, they're always, it's not DEI. If it is DEI, it's been around for 25 years. But this idea that we listen to everybody, right? It's kind of we're America, we're a melting pot, and everybody has a chance to govern. But when I saw, and Trump has brought in women, a number of women, some very competent, into his administration. He did it the first term, he did it the second term. But there is a kind of, and this is where I'm going to get catty, and I'm sorry, this is what I think. You look at the way the women present, and except for the World Wrestling, or the Wrestling Federation woman he put in charge of the education department, and Susie Wiles, and those are women that are in their 60s. If you look at all the ones under 50, they all present in a way that is kind of reminds you of Trump's days when he ran beauty contests, right? Everybody has to look a certain way. Everybody, I want to see, I don't miss this, but you remember Biden, and he had some like cross dressers, and he had a transvestite woman, started out as a woman. She was running one of the health, I guess she was the Surgeon General or something. I don't know what it was. But anyway, she was not an attractive woman. I'll give her that she says she's a woman, but she was not like attractive. She was like, you would just run into her in Walmart. That's like fine. It's all right. But with Trump, you see appearance over everything, appearance over competence, appearance over, loyalty to Trump. In a competition. And I've said this before about Pam Bondi, but that famous thing, a couple months into the administration, they had something, and he's going around recognizing people, and he left off Pam Bondi, and she goes, "But sir, I'm right here, sir. Look at me. And again, that's not very professional. In my world, in the military, if somebody didn't mention your name, you're in good shape. You do not want to attract undue attention to yourself.
It's a focus on the wrong things. It's
exactly.
It's no longer a focus on merit. There's a military, I think one of the generals that he fired, one of the guys he fired, that put out I didn't save it. That put out a book or something, or wrote an article for the first time on foreign policy. And he was talking about this. He was saying that the president, I think he's talking about how the president, number one, is using the army on domestic issues, and that's moving away the focus, and that's stretching them too thin. And number two, he's no longer focusing on merit. And that's a problem that a lot of people have. A lot of the decisions that are being made are not focusing on the right things.
Right. So and again, Hegseth is a prime example. He doesn't fit into I call him the Ken doll. He's the Ken doll to the rest of the Barbies. But Hegseth, clearly, to put a guy with his lack of experience, knowledge, and also just judgment, on top of is your guy in the Pentagon, the overall in charge of all your generals. Honestly, if we lived in a time which Trump and all presidents think they live in the most dangerous and time of the, we have wars, we're trying to end wars, whatever. If you really believed that, then you wouldn't put an incompetent in charge of your Pentagon. You'd say, you know what? Some of these things aren't that important to me. Some of these positions, like Health and Human Services, there's a bunch of guys that could do that. Where did he put Pulte before he put him in intelligence, right? Pulte was up housing or something. So yeah, it's fine. He knows a little about housing. It's not a big deal because it's not my priority. But Trump said, we're going to take Greenland. We're going to do, Canada. We got Venezuela. We got all these things. We're going to be back. America is back. We got the new Dunroe Doctrine. Okay. That's a lot of change. That's a lot of challenge. That's a big ask of the Pentagon. You'd think you'd put your best guy, your very smartest guy, the one who would not just have credibility in your eyes as president, but would also have credibility from the rest of the organization looking up to that guy. And he didn't do that. He pulled Hegseth off Fox News. I mean, that was Hegseth's last job, was Fox News mouthpiece. That does not work. Okay. And then Hegseth has stumbled again and again and again. At any time, people say, well, he's gonna fire Hegseth. He's gonna never fired him, hadn't fired him so far. Maybe he will. I mean, he certainly could have fired him any week of the past year and a half. He could have fired him for something he did. He is incompetent, not qualified to do the job, and yet that's Trump's pick. Now, why is that? What is Trump's thinking
Loyalty.
here? Loyalty, flattery, but seriously, optics are terrible in the military. That's what I don't know. I think I know which one you're talking about. Which general?
Optics for the average. Yeah, exactly. Wrote one. But optics. When I say optics, it's not for the military personnel, but it's more optics for the average voter, the Fox News audience.
And that might have worked for a while until the Iran war, because obviously he screwed up when he didn't go after Epstein. That was over a year ago. But then this spring, he screwed up again with this Iran war. So he has broken MAGA. When you got Tucker and Marjorie Taylor Greene, all these people talking about new parties, a new party, not new parties, not like, I'm going to be a libertarian, I'm going to be a Green Party. They're not saying that. They're saying we're going to do what Perot did in 1991 or whenever it was. We are going to have an America First party, a real America First party, which is what was it? Reform. His party was the Reform Party, Perot. Do you remember him?
I know Perot. Yeah, I don't remember him, but I know about him. A few members, a lot of comparisons are being made to what Tucker is trying to achieve now, to Perot's success.
But Perot did not have particular, Perot's audience was really the Republican audience. I mean, the existing Republican Party, for the most part, Perot had been a Republican. He was big in the military-industrial complex. He'd made his money selling arms, fighting the first Iraq war. But different world from then. I mean, that was ages ago. So what these guys are talking about, that's actually possible. I mean, you've got a bunch of non-voters. You've got probably half or 2/3 of MAGA, which will never trust a Trumpite ever again. I mean, look at Dan Bongino. This is what happens. Dan Bongino is like, big time Trump guy. Everybody loves his talk show, his podcast. But then what happened when he got out? He didn't disavow Trump because he's too loyal to do that or whatever. And he can't get his numbers back. Nobody wants to hear what Dan.
Really? I didn't check that. He didn't get his numbers back?
No, he didn't get them back. And Dan Bongino he lost a bunch of his audience. And now he's ridiculed by some of the former folks that were a part of his audience because he lost his credibility. He had credibility before as a podcaster because of his background experience. He'd been a Secret Service. He'd done these things, knew these people. His credibility was solid. And then he worked for a couple, 3 months, and then quit. But he didn't throw Trump under the bus. Well, guess what? We are a nation where if you quit the Trump administration, you're going to be criticized if you don't spill the beans and explain why this guy lied to everybody. What caused him change? If you're going to say, oh no, Trump has a plan, he's playing 6D chess, and you're still saying that, nobody's listening to you. So I'm just saying it's a different world. So a third party, an alternative party is our system is not geared to that. But there are plenty of people out there that would be very appealing, that would be appealed to that. And then, look at how Tulsi Gabbard, and RFK, Democrat, lifelong Democrat, brought in disaffected, MAHA people, health people, your average non-voting independent, and people that had a bad experience with the health system. These guys were saying, just on RFK's side, and on Tulsi's side, she's anti-war. You get the anti-war vote, you get the pro-health vote, you get disaffected young Republicans and conservatives, you get your Democratic socialists who are being beat down or will be beat down soon enough by the Democratic Party. They're gonna make what Hillary Clinton did to Bernie Sanders look like child's play. They will not, they know the old neocon Democrats cannot tolerate the new young Democrats. So there's tons of people who could easily come together. They're already together. They just don't know it. So that is a lot easier than what Perot did back in the day. He had to, he had money. He could get himself on ballots. He only got on 20, I think, states. He wasn't even on every state ballot.
So you think this time around that if they come together, if they join forces, if Massey, Kent, all of them come together, they could really make a difference?
Well, it's you know what? Okay, in politics, there's one of the things they say is like, there's a cartoon. It's a cartoon. It helps you understand everything. So the politician is in front of the thing. He looks back to all the people, and and they turn away. This is not the other one I told you where the guy walks off the cliff. This is when the politicians, he's got all his people behind him, turns and looks at them, and he notices they're walking another direction. The whole crowd's just moving in another direction. And the politician says, wait, I must lead my people. And so he can run around and get in front of it. That's what politicians do. They need support to propel them forward. Even the worst politicians who have the worst messaging, like Hitler. Well, his messaging wasn't that bad for the Germans, but Hitler couldn't have gone anywhere without a whole bunch of people saying, hey, this dude's saying what I think. This dude is putting it all together. I like that. So the politicians, when they see the movement of popular opinion and they understand that it's real, that people actually will not vote. No Republican or Democrat is going to get some of these people's votes. They will not vote. So it's either, well, I could get their vote and then I could be in power. The politicians love power. This is what they're about, most of them. So the politicians will, I think they're already sensing that this sea change is happening. And we won't see it in full this next election because it's only two years away. But it's a big problem for the country. Which, again, let's take care of our country. Let's figure out what our politics ought to be. Let's give Americans a voice. Why don't we do, I hate to say America first because Trump ruined that. But, we do need to take care of our own country. And none of that includes all of these wars. And it also doesn't include all of this profit taking by American elites. And by
the profit taking is wrong. It's morally wrong. It sets a precedent. But for me, that bothers me. That bothers me. But nothing compared to the war. The war is just a whole other level. The war causes, profit taking. It makes $1 billion there, $2 billion there, $3 billion there. The war costs hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yep, and it ruins everything. I mean, the parents of if you have a child that's killed in a war that should never have happened, and it did because, arrogant Americans or arrogant Israelis or arrogant anybody that said, this is what I want, I'm going to kill your kids. You don't get over that. There's and everybody knows this around the world. I mean, Americans watch, we watch all these crime shows like Cold Cases, right? And they interview people who have lost a child 30 years ago. And they finally find out who it was that killed their kid 35 years later. And those parents, it is the exact same pain that they felt the day their kid disappeared. Okay. So we know the cost of war. You kill people's kids, it stays with you until you end your time on earth. It does not go away. Most of the time it's not forgiven. We're not all Erica Kirk, right? Where she could get up there on the day of 2 days after her husband's shot and say, oh, I forgive the guy.
Yeah, I've never had time to do a deep dive into this, but that was such a weird
you probably don't need to, but that's interesting that she would say that because even Christians, and we're supposed to forgive. It's hard to do it, but you're commanded love your enemy and all that. So this is the challenge for Christians to do it. But when Erica Kirk said that, like 2 or 3 days after this happened, oh, this is what I want to say to the guy, I forget his name, that they said, I forgive you. And I think the Christians in that crowd, which was most of the people in that crowd were probably Protestant Christians, for the most of some Catholics. They're like, what? That's a little soon, because we know that it's just not normal to do that. Anyway, the cost of destroying lives and land. I mean, this when you see what they're doing, not just in Gaza, not just in Lebanon, but in the West Bank, where Palestinians have been, they're carving up the land and using the law. They've always done that. But now you've got unleashed settlers, which really should be leashed. If they were on leashes, I think we would all be happier. But they're unleashed. They're kind of like wild dogs, in packs, and they're going around setting fire to wheat fields and uprooting olive trees and stealing sheep, stealing goats, walking around people's houses, knocking on the windows saying, get out, get out. Well, that's thug behavior. It's uncivilized. And, nobody wants that. It's just not allowed. That causes great harm. And it only takes a few stories like that. Then now that becomes part of your lived mythology, right? And that happens when you're 16 or 17. You're really going to change your mind when you're 80? No, settlers are evil. And again, the Palestinians have done a wonderful job of being kind to people. People that meet them, they say, well, they don't talk bad about the Israelis, they talk a little bit bad about people that might have personally harmed them, and Zionism as a destructive political view. But they don't blame all Jews for everything. And the Iranians impressed us too with this. They said the Iranians know that Americans don't support the war, and they accept that. They don't say like, well, you voted for the president, and that means his war is your war. They understand the difference between our government and the people. And honestly, even the Russians understand that. And I think we understood that about the Soviet Union back in the day. There was a lot of people, when we thought about the Soviet Union, we said, well, it's their government. The Soviet people, they just want to be free. They're a lot like we are, we would say that. But when you interface directly with people that harm you or take your kids or destroy your property or injure you, you don't forget it. It is a lot of work to do that. And, it's natural that we would hear death to America. I mean, my God, it's all could have been prevented.
Exactly. How do you think Iran would be moving forward if a deal is reached or not even reached? Do you worry that maybe some commander in Iran takes a decision that drags the region back into the war, drags the US back into war? Do you think Iran would seek their revenge maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now? How do you think Iran would look like post this war once they have time to reflect on everything?
Yeah. Well, if anything, the next year or two, as we try to fumble through the MOU and then extending the MOU, hopefully, and maybe getting to a different place, assuming we don't decide to forcibly rebuild all our bases and make this our top issue, which we shouldn't do. I don't think our national security strategy really includes making the Middle East our top issue. But if we just keep kind of withdrawing and, leaving Iran alone, I think we'll be fine. But there is going to be great strength. Well, there's already great strength in Iran, and you can see it. You can see it with the response to the participation in this funeral. But there is a lot of folks there that want justice, and not just for the Manab 168. They want justice for all the wrongdoing that has been done to them and conducted against them by Tel Aviv and the United States specifically. And that's not going to go away overnight. But I think what it should do, instead of them trying to, like, maybe the IRGC commander or somebody, stoking up something, I think they're going to do it in unity. So I don't think they're going to make mistakes. They haven't made any mistakes so far. They've been very cautious. The things that they are celebrating or remembering in this funeral is the wisdom and the patience and how the guidance of Khamenei was to make Iran strong, resilient, self-sufficient. These are the things, sovereign. These kinds of things are what I think is bringing the people together now, and I think that'll hold them together. And we don't have that in this country. Sovereignty, what, Donald Trump the king? No, we don't have that. We have big issues at home. We have issues with Israel. Israel has never been less popular in the United States than it is now. And that includes back in the day when we had real anti-Semitism, in the 40s, when a lot of Americans, they did not want, that was true anti-Semitism, hatred of Jews. We don't have that now. We have intolerance of Zionism, and it's very widely shared. So, yeah, we're not in a good place to do anything. I don't think, and I just don't think we have it in us. No, our leadership might be crazy, but there's not going to be any follow-up. Like I said, I don't see anything happening in the world, whether it's the Middle East or any place else, that would cause literally 3 or 4 million young men and women, 16 to 24, rushing into the recruitment offices. I see nothing.
And that's something that should
not happening.
Yeah,
we don't believe in it. We're not doing it. Nobody's going to do that.
I think this is a self-reflection that is really needed, hopefully, post this war for the US and for the Western world. I think it's not just the US. But Karen, thank you as always. It's a pleasure to chat to you.
Yeah, same here. Thanks, Mario.
Professor, how are you?
I'm fine, Mario. How are you today?
What's happening with the economy, Professor? What is going on? Oil prices are just not making any sense right now.
Well, yeah, let's get into that a little bit. I think the one thing, following up on other conversations that we've had, is the fact that on the 1st of July, the transit fees that Turkey charges to go through the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles went up, and those are legal, of course, under the Montreux Convention of 1936. Now, if you listen to what's coming out of Washington, D.C., as well as other capitals around the world, the claim is by the U.S. Secretary of State is that no transit fees, tolls, whatever you want to call them, are charged on any international waterways or straits any place in the world. And he claims that those are illegal. Well, here's a legal one. There is a legal one. It's a Montreux Agreement. And it was just July 1st, only a few days ago, that the rates were increased by 15% by Turkey. They annually adjust these, but the fee went up by 15% on July 1st. So
is that more than usual? Is that more than it usually goes up?
No.
Okay, no, but it's the timing of it and the symbolic nature of it is that while we're talking about the Strait of Hormuz and how Iran should not be able to charge a fee, Turkey's fee in their straits went up, the fee they charge per year.
It went up, and it is legal under an international convention and agreement where the countries that signed that agreement, by the way, were all the countries that border have access to the Black Sea. Those countries, plus France, Greece, Yugoslavia, which doesn't exist anymore. Of course, some of the borderlands were the Soviets signed it, but the U.S. and China were not involved. So you had a small list of countries, all the Black Sea countries, plus France, Yugoslavia, Japan, Australia. Those were the signatories. The U.S. and China were not involved with the thing.
Do you think the U.S. will come around to it and eventually accept an Iranian fee, or they would continue resisting it? And the reason I ask is a lot of people are worried that this disagreement is what drags the country, both countries, but one of them will instigate it back into war. European countries, according to Bloomberg, have already accepted, some European countries, and some Gulf countries have already accepted that a fee is inevitable. I don't know what the sentiment is in Asia, but the US is still saying that is a red line. They will not accept a fee by the Iranians. And the Iranians are still saying is they will not go back to how things were. And the Omanis, which are in the middle, according to, I think, New York Times or Wall Street Journal, they've sent an official proposal to the Americans of the structure of the fee that they will be charging with the Iranians, the new structure of the Strait of Hormuz that will include a fee. So just trying to understand what the outcome is likely to be.
Some of the Europeans are already on board with the concept anyway. Maybe it's because they're used to paying a fee to Turkey to go through the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles. And the Asians are on board or appear to be on board. I think the best way to solve it and have a stable situation going forward would be to have a convention like Montreux, because by the way, that was preceded by Lucerne. There was another agreement before the Montreux, so it went on for a long time after World War I, basically, and the breakup of the Ottoman Empire. By the way, before those agreements, just to put things in historical context, the Ottomans, Turkey had fortresses and military operations overseeing what was going on the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles. And these agreements kind of, shall we say, demilitarized the thing and eventually settled it down into what we have today. And I think the easiest way to do it, you've got the Gulf states. Those would be similar to the Black Sea states, and maybe the great powers also, Russia, United States, and China, and they have a convention and settle the thing.
Were you surprised, by the way, of the size of the funeral in Iran? Over 10 million now. It was 9 yesterday. 10 million people have attended so far the funeral processions. That's a massive number. I don't know. Like, if you look at the number, that just shows that the Iranian government, the Iranian regime, whatever you want to call it, the IRGC is there to stay. And obviously, they're all pretty upset with the US. And then if you look at the red lines that the Iranians have drawn, they haven't really budged from them. I don't know. And then you got Netanyahu coming to the US in a few days, I think in a couple of days, in 2 days. So putting all these pieces together, I just worry that we are at an impasse. But then that's the negative side. Then the positive side, Professor, is that the argument that the Americans cannot afford a resumption of the war. People are challenging this argument, saying, hey, there's breathing space now. Look at the price of oil. That gives Trump the flexibility to maybe reconsider military action because he has more leeway. It's a very different world now to what it was when the price of oil was over $100. What's your analysis of the situation now?
Well, I think, first of all, I think Trump has concluded, and he literally has said this, that if the strait continued to be completely shut off, we would end up with an economic catastrophe. So he wants a deal and he wants to get out. And it's clear the MOU is just the starting point in that. But you have to remember, I view that as essentially signing a document that basically said we give up and we want to get out. So I think that's where we're at. I think he wants to get out and he doesn't want to continue. We know what Netanyahu is going to try to talk him into, and that is continuing and ramping the thing up. So there you have the dilemma that is going to face Donald Trump.
What do you make of oil prices? That's something that's been really perplexing me. I've spoken to a lot of economists about it. The amount of oil coming out of the Strait of Hormuz is still about a third of what it was before the war. Yet futures prices are down to pre-war levels when the strategic reserves are still low and there's still that massive shortage that the market is the market needs. Really, it needs the oil that was coming in before the war to get back to the status quo. There hasn't been that massive demand destruction that is needed to maintain low prices when supply is restricted. And that's not even considering the risk premium that should be taken into consideration about the risk of the war restarting or Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz again. So putting all these pieces together, how are oil prices so low?
Well, I think to look at that, by the way, just back to the MOU, the word that was going through my mind but not coming out of my lips was, it was really a surrender. The U.S.
surrender document, yeah.
So that's that. Now let's go to the oil prices. The oil prices, understand what's going on. You have to look at the forward curve. That is the spot or current market for current delivery versus the price at some future point in time. And what happened after the war started, the oil market and the diesel market and gasoline market, all the derivative products went into what they call a extreme steep backwardation. That's when the spot price for current delivery is way above the price for some future delivery point, whether it be the end of this year or end of next year or what have you. So that's the thing that happened. Now this is fairly unusual because if you look at the last 20 years of data, the crude market, the Brent market, has only been in backwardation about 5% of the time. Now, what normally, I'm setting up the economics, kind of the principles of what's going on here. Normally, it's in what's called contango, or a carry market, where the spot market is a lower price than the future market. And that is, for Brent, 95% of the time. That's the way it is. So it flipped from contango. Basically, it was kind of flat, right before it wasn't contango, it wasn't backwardation, it was basically flat. So the war starts, it goes into this huge backwardation. And the best way to understand the shape of the forward curve, it gives you basically it's a loan market. So if a market is in backwardation, that means that inventories are very scarce, and people are trying to borrow from the future and resupply short inventories. That's when things are in backwardation. Normally it's in contango. It's adequate inventories, everything is fine, positive carry, and so forth. So now what's happened, it hasn't completely flipped, by the way. I just looked at the Friday markets. It hasn't completely flipped into contango. So in fact, it hasn't flipped into contango. The oil market's still in backwardation. If you look at Friday's spot market, Brent was 72.13. The 1 year out, it was more or less flat, 72.37. And then if we go to December 2027, it's 70.34. So it's basically kind of flat now. And that compares, by the way, to April 7th, 2026. The spot was 111, and the 2 year December 2027 was at 75. So it's a huge difference. Now, what you get into, and you've interviewed Jeff Curry about this, he's on top of the thing. And so the oil market's kind of flat. It's gone from backwardation to flat. The gasoline and diesel, that's not the case. There's still considerable shortage in inventory showing up if you read the curve properly. And the curve now for gasoline spot 295 forward at the end of this year 227. So the spot market price is a little higher than the futures market for the end of the year in December. And diesel, you end up with the same thing. The spot price is 326, and the December 2006 is 299. So that means there's still quite a bit of tightness in these product markets.
On the refined product side.
On the refined products. Now, this is a point that Curry's made in interviews you've had with Curry. Of course, he's one of the real experts on this kind of stuff. So we've had this kind of temporary increase in the flow, kind of, shall we say, unanticipated increase in the flow coming out of the Gulf as things loosen up a little bit. And they're only loosening up at a trickle, I would say. It's not a flood coming out of there. Exactly, some more is coming out than was coming out before. And as a result of that, you've had the immediate spot inventory starting to fill up, and that backwardation has come out of the curve and it's settled down. That's not the case with these refined products, by the way. The refineries are going full blast, and we still have shortages in inventories of gasoline and diesel, as well as all the other refined products, by the way.
Is that because of the issues in Russia, as well as the logistical issues with all that oil stuck in the Gulf and coming out slowly at a trickle and not going to the right refinery to be refined? Is that why the refined products?
Yes, that's the Russian thing comes into the picture, because the Ukrainians have been denting the refining capacity and damaging it in Russia, and the refined products have dried up. The ones coming out of Russia. I mean, Russia's into rationing for gasoline and diesel fuel, and importing some of those refined products. So that's why we have this situation for the refined products. Now, going forward, what do I anticipate that the markets don't seem to be anticipating, and that is that the people are going to find out that, well, we actually are short of inventory. What about all the crude that was drained out? We're at all-time lows in inventories, but that isn't showing up in the market today.
Exactly. That's the weird part.
The market would be normally. I think the market should be in backwardation for Brent, and it isn't. It's flat.
Where the spot price is higher than the futures price.
Yes, spot prices should still be higher than the futures price, in my view.
Because of the shortages, because of the shortage of oil for the refineries as well. So not enough is coming out of the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, it's mainly my argument would be that the inventories are at all-time lows. And normally, by the way, all you have to do is look at a forward curve with the spot and futures prices, and you know whether you've got adequate inventories. If you do, the spot price will be lower than the futures price. You'll have a carry trade, a carry market, a so-called contango. If you have a shortage, however, and inventories are low, you're always in backwardation. Heavy backwardation, where the spot price is above the futures price, and people are actually borrowing from the future to put product into inventory.
Yeah.
And they're paying a price for it, with the spot price, of course, being above the futures price. That's normally what happens. So this is very abnormal, by the way. And all this was worked out, by the way, in 1930 by Holbrook working. He was the big expert who got into the relationship for the first time between the forward curves and inventories. And what we know from that work and the work going forward is that when inventories are inadequate, when you see a backwardation in the forward curve. But we're not seeing that right now. But we know inventories are at very low levels. So it's kind of anomalous what we're seeing right now.
It is bizarre. It is. I don't know why traders are just expecting not only the war to have ended, but oil to just flow out of the Strait of Hormuz at the same numbers as it did before the war. But that's just not happening. Today, in the last 24 hours, only 39 ships in total went through the straits. About a third of what it would be, even less than a third of what it was before the war. So reality is just so disconnected from what the markets are telling us. It's just weird for everybody, and different people have different explanations.
Yeah, I have no explanation except to say that we know this is anomalous, and we can go back to all this academic and as well as industry studies that have been done relating the forward curve to inventories. And if inventories are low, which they are now, we know that's something we know. You find the price structure should be one in which you observe spot prices above futures prices by a considerable level. They are a little bit now, but not very much. But they should be really quite. You should be seeing quite a bit of backwardation in there for Brent, and you're not.
Agree. Professor, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for the analysis. Really enjoyed it, and I always appreciate you giving us the time on the show.
Great to be with you, Mario. Have a great day.
Same to you, Professor.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we'll be live again in about an hour with Aaron David Miller to go through the latest updates with the negotiations. I'll see you guys shortly. Bye-bye.